Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today, we're looking at something pretty fascinating, really the future of allergy diagnosis. We got this great stack of sources from a listener about component-resolved diagnostics, CRD for short.
That's right. Think of it as molecular mapping for allergies. Our sources really cover the wide utility of CRD. We'll be digging into major food allergies, peanut, milk, egg, and then shifting to how it changes the game for risk assessment with things like, cat and dog allergies.
Okay, so our mission here is to unpack what CRD actually is, how this molecular approach stacks up against, the traditional tests, which can be a bit hit or miss, and where this clarity gives the biggest shortcuts, the biggest safety improvements for doctors, and ultimately for you.
And we really have to start with the baseline, the clinical standard we've relied on for years. I mean, for decades, the absolute gold standard for diagnosing a food allergy. That's been the double-blind, placebo-controlled food challenge, the DBPCFC.
Right, the DBPCFC. And the sources are clear. It's the most accurate, no question.
Yeah.
But wow, it's expensive. It's technically really difficult. It takes ages. And the big one, it carry that risk of triggering a serious, potentially anaphylactic reaction. We're basically looking at whether we can sidestep that whole risky process for a lot of people.
Exactly. So CRD, let's define it. Traditional tests like a skin prick test or the standard blood test for a specific IgE, the SIgE test, they measure your reaction to a mixture, a whole soup of different proteins from, say, a peanut extract.
Okay.
CRD is different. It breaks down that soup. It measures your specific IgE levels to individual allergenic molecules, the components.
So instead of just one peanut allergy, yes, no number, you get a detailed breakdown. Like you react this much to RH2, but maybe not at all to RH8.
Precisely. And the potential is huge. CRD lets us define specific allergy types or phenotypes. It helps build these tailored risk profiles for each patient. And maybe most importantly, it helps us see through the fog of cross-reactivity that plagues the old tests.
Okay, but let's manage expectations up front. Bit of a spoiler here.
Sure.
While CRD looks incredibly powerful, especially for certain proteins we'll get into, the sources are pretty clear it can't completely replace that gold standard food challenge. Not yet, anyway.
That's true, especially for finding out someone's exact trigger threshold or predicting how severe their specific reaction might be. But it gets so close, particularly for ruling in an allergy with high certainty for some components, that it can make that challenge unnecessary for a whole lot of people.
Okay, let's unpack why we even need this. What's wrong with the current tests? Why are they often, inconclusive? Why do so many people end up needing that challenge?
Right. The core issue really is this trade-off between sensitivity catching everyone who is allergic and specificity correctly identifying those who aren't. Especially specificity. When you test against the whole food extract, like F13 for peanut, you just get a lot of false positives. The test says allergic, but the person can eat peanuts just fine.
Yeah, I remember seeing those numbers for whole peanut SIgE. People have tried setting cutoffs, right? Like levels around 10 or 15 kilo to predict a reaction.
They have. But the problem is, if you push that cutoff high enough to get really good specificity, say 100% specificity, meaning zero false positives,
then what happens?
your sensitivity tanks. It can drop down to 30% sometimes.
So you'd miss 7 out of 10 truly allergic people just to be sure you didn't mislabel anyone.
Exactly. And that makes the test pretty useless for ruling out an allergy confidently. It forces everyone towards the challenge.
And the main reason for this poor specificity? You mentioned it.
Cross-reactivity. It's the big confounder.
Right, where proteins from different sources like pollen and food look similar enough that the immune system reacts to both. It creates noise.
That's a great way to put it. CRD helps cut through that noise by looking at the individual molecules. Think of it like having a master key, your IgE antibody. If two different locks, two proteins have similar shapes, that key might turn in both. The old test just shouts, the key fits. CRD tells you which lock the key was really made for and what opening that specific lock means clinically.
Okay, give us the classic example for peanut allergy, the one that really highlights this molecular mix-up.
The best one is AeroAH8. It's a PR10 protein, pathogenesis-related protein family 10. These PR10 proteins are very similar structurally to BET-V1, which is the major allergen in birch pollen.
And birch pollen allergy is super common.
Extremely common. So if you're allergic to birch pollen, your body makes IgE against BET-V1, and because AeroAH8 in peanuts looks so similar,
Your immune system reacts to the peanut protein too, even if you're not truly allergic to peanut itself.
Precisely. Your whole peanut test comes back positive. But, and this is key, these PR10 proteins like ARH8 are usually heat labile. They break down easily with cooking or digestion.
So they don't typically cause the dangerous systemic reactions, more like mild localized stuff.
Exactly. Often just oral allergy syndrome, itchy mouth, maybe some lip swelling, rarely anaphylaxis. So a positive whole peanut test leaves the clinician guessing, is this a true dangerous allergy to the stable peanut proteins or just a harmless cross reaction from birch pollen? You can't tell.
That distinction is everything, really.
And the research backs this up completely. Studies actually showed that patients who passed their peanut challenge, the ones who are not clinically allergic, were more likely to be sensitized to ARH8 than the patients who failed.
Wow. So reacting to ARH8 was almost predicting tolerance in some cases.
In a sense, yes. It highlights perfectly why we need CRD to separate the clinically relevant players, the ones that predict severe reactions, from these cross-reactive components that just muddy the waters.
Okay, so if we need a poster child for CRD, peanut allergy seems to be it. The stakes are highest, and this is where CRD really delivers actionable insights. Let's name the key players. Which peanut components do these studies zero in on?
Generally, it's about 6 main ones: ARH1, ARH2, ARH3, ARH6, ARH8, the cross-reactive one we just discussed, and ARH9. But among those, 2 consistently stand out as the absolute best predictors of whether someone will pass or fail a peanut challenge.
And those are?
ARH2 and ARH6. They blow the diagnostic accuracy of the whole peanut extract, F13, out of the water.
Okay, why? What makes ARH2 and ARH6 so much better at predicting serious reactions compared to, say, ARH8?
It comes down to their protein family and, critically, their stability. ARH2 and ARH6 are both what we call 2S albumins. These are storage proteins.
And storage proteins are tough.
Very tough. Unlike ARH8, the PR10 protein, which breaks down easily, these 2S albumins are incredibly resistant to heat, to food processing, and even to digestion in the gut.
Meaning they survive the journey through the stomach, get absorbed into the bloodstream, mostly intact.
And that's where they can trigger a major systemic, potentially life-threatening reaction. Their stability makes them potent.
Got it. So RH2 gets a lot of attention in the sources. The big Danish study, Eller and Bunslev Jensen, right? Mm-hmm. The data seems really compelling.
It really is spectacular. They looked at 205 patients undergoing challenges.
Walk us through the numbers. What did they find for RH2?
Okay, first, RH2 levels correlated really well with the traditional whole peanut test results, which suggests it's a major driver of that overall reactivity. The correlation was strong, about 0.88. But the real power came from finding specific cutoff points. They calculated that the optimal cutoff to predict if the challenge would be positive or negative was an ARH2 level greater than 1.28 Keeley.
And how good was that cutoff?
Pretty good. Sensitivity was 76%, so it caught most of the allergic patients, and specificity was very high at 97%.
97% specificity is great, much better than the whole extract. Only 3 false positives out of 100 non-allergic people. But ideally, for avoiding a risky challenge, you want absolute certainty, right?
Yeah.
100% specificity.
That's the holy grail, and they found it. If they nudged that cutoff just a little higher to ARH2 greater than 1.63 Keeley, specificity hit 1.00. Perfect. Meaning not a single patient with an ARH2 level above 1.63 failed to react in the challenge. If you're above that level, you are allergic.
That is clinically transformative. You can definitively diagnose a dangerous allergy without the oral challenge for those patients.
Exactly. And crucially, even at that 100% specificity cutoff, the sensitivity was still high, around 70%.
Think about the impact. How many challenges did that avoid in their study?
In that specific group of 205 patients who initially needed challenges, applying that 1.63 kilol ARH2 rule would have meant only 92 actually needed to proceed.
Wow.
They could have avoided the challenge in 55% of the cases. That's a massive improvement in safety, efficiency, cost, everything.
Huge. It changes the whole management pathway, gives certainty much faster.
Yeah.
Okay, you also mentioned ARH6 often performs just as well, or sometimes even better.
Yes. ARH2 and ARH6 are often talked about together. They're both 2S albumins, structurally similar. That systematic review by Flores, Kim, and colleagues, looking across studies, found data suggesting ARH6 might, in some settings, have slightly higher overall diagnostic accuracy than ARH2. They reported figures like 94.9% sensitivity and 95.1% specificity for ARH6 at a cutoff over 0.8 ISU.
So RH2 and ARH6 are the clear frontrunners. Much better than RH1, 3, 8, or 9 for predicting reactions.
Yes, definitely. They are the key markers for systemic peanut allergy risk.
This molecular clarity is amazing. But, okay, here's where it gets a bit tricky for me, looking at the bigger picture. The sources point out this major issue, geographic variability. If these cutoffs are so precise, why do they change so much depending on where the study was done?
That's a really critical point, and it's a major hurdle for just taking a published cutoff and using it everywhere. The decision points, the specific Kewl numbers, they vary because the populations are different. Different underlying sensitization patterns, different diets, different genetic backgrounds maybe. It all plays a role.
Give us the numbers again. How different were those cutoffs for RH2?
Right. So the Danish study found that 100% specificity cutoff at 1.63 Kewl whale. But a French study, their optimal cutoff for high specificity was way lower, just 0.23 Kewl whale. And an English study found their 100% specificity level at 0.55 Kewl whale.
Okay, those are wildly different. 1.63 versus 0.23. If I'm a doctor in, say, Canada, which number do I use? How can I trust any of them without doing my own local study? Doesn't that kind of limit the immediate plug-and-play benefit?
You've absolutely nailed the key practical limitation right now. It underscores that you have to establish and validate these cutoffs for your specific patient population. CRD tells you what the patient is reacting to, which is revolutionary, but determining the clinically relevant level of that reaction, that still needs local context. You can't just blindly apply a cutoff from a Danish paper in a clinic in Chicago, for example. It could be misleading.
Okay, let's broaden out from peanut, which seems like the best case scenario for CRD right now. What about other major food allergies? Let's use that systematic review data you mentioned. It looked at the big 8.
Right, the Flores-Kim review. Generally, the pattern held. For most other foods, the specific CRD components offered high specificity good for confirming allergy or assessing risk, but often had lower sensitivity than the whole extract test.
Which makes sense. You're focusing on specific proteins, not the whole mix.
Exactly. And for many foods, there just weren't as many studies as for peanut, making firm conclusions harder. But let's look at some key examples. Hen's egg.
Yeah, egg allergy. What's the key component there, and what does it tell us?
For egg, the main player identified is GALD1, that's ovomucoid. And what's really interesting about GALD1 is its power for phenotyping the allergy. Egg allergy is tricky because some egg proteins, like ovalbumin, are heat labile. They break down when you cook them.
But ovomucoid isn't.
No. GALD1 ovomucoid is highly heat stable. It survives cooking and baking pretty well.
So if you react specifically to GALD1, you're likely allergic to egg in all its forms, raw, cooked, baked into a cake.
That's the implication. GALD1 seems to be the best marker for distinguishing between those who only react to raw or lightly cooked egg versus those who react even to extensively heated egg, which often predicts a more persistent allergy.
What were the numbers on that?
For predicting allergy to heated egg, the more persistent type GALD1 showed about 84% sensitivity and 90% specificity at its optimal cutoff. For raw egg allergy, sensitivity was lower, around 61%, but specificity was really high, 97%.
So CRD hosts refine the advice. Instead of just avoid egg, it might be avoid all egg versus you might tolerate baked egg.
Precisely. It moves beyond a simple yes-no to a more nuanced understanding, which directly impacts dietary management.
That insight into protein stability driving the phenotype is key.
Okay, moving on to tree nuts. Hazelnut seemed like another good example where CRD could sort out cross-reactivity versus true allergy.
Yeah, hazelnut's a classic case.
Yeah.
Traditional hazelnut tests are often positive just because of birch pollen cross-reactivity. But the CRD data pointed to one standout component for true hazelnut allergy, chlorofortine.
And chlorofortine is? It's another 2S albumin, just like ARA-H2 and ARA-H6 in peanut.
Okay, so another stable storage protein, likely predicting more severe systemic reaction.
Exactly. One study found chlorofortine had amazing performance, 100% sensitivity and almost 94% specificity at its cutoff. Now compare that to CORA1, that's the hazelnut PR10 protein, the one that cross-reacts with birch pollen's BET-V1.
And its specificity was?
Terrible. Around 7% in some studies, meaning almost everyone allergic to birch tested positive for CORA1, whether they could eat hazelnuts or not.
So the clinical picture becomes much clearer. Reacting only to CORA1 likely means just mild oral allergy syndrome from birch pollen, low risk from roasted hazelnuts.
Right. But if you react strongly to chlorofortine, that signals a high risk of a systemic reaction.
Makes sense. Were there other relevant hazelnut components?
The sources also mention COR8, which is a lipid transfer protein, or LTP. LTPs are also stable proteins, common in Mediterranean areas, often linked to severe reactions. Core 8 showed very high specificity, over 96%, but its sensitivity was quite low, only about 6%. So if you do react to Core 8, it's significant, but many truly allergic people won't react to it.
Okay, so for hazelnut, Cora 14 and maybe Cora 9, another storage protein mentioned, seem to be the key markers for high-risk systemic allergy cutting through that birch pollen noise.
That's the takeaway.
All right, one more from this food group, shrimp.
Shrimp allergy primarily involves LIT-V1, which is tropomyosin. Tropomyosin is a muscle protein. It's known as a pan-allergen because it's found in lots of different invertebrates, other crustaceans, mollusks, even dust mites.
So cross-reactivity is an issue again.
It can be. LIT-V1 showed pretty good sensitivity, almost 83%, but its specificity was lower, around 56%.
Because reacting to shrimp tropomyosin might just reflect an allergy to dust mites or maybe another shellfish.
Potentially, yes. However, they did identify another component, LIT-V4, which had lower sensitivity, around 35%, but much better specificity, nearly 94%. And interestingly, some research is now looking even deeper at specific reactive sites or epitopes within LIT-V1 and LIT-V2. The idea is that maybe reacting to certain tiny parts of the protein is more predictive than reacting to the whole thing.
Wow, getting even more granular, so potential for even more refinement down the line.
It suggests the field is still evolving towards greater precision.
This idea of moving beyond just diagnosis to prediction is really powerful. Let's switch gears to cow's milk allergy, CMA. Here, the sources suggest CRD offers insights not just for the yes-no, but for the how long and how bad. CMA affects maybe 2% of kids, but most, like 80%, outgrow it pretty early. So the big question isn't just if they're allergic, but can we predict who's going to have it stick around, who will have persistent CMA?
This is a really strong application for CRD, giving that prognostic glimpse that traditional tests just don't offer reliably. The key study, we have followed kids over several years, which is crucial. It allowed them to link the initial IgE levels measured by CRD to how long it actually took for the kids to become tolerant.
Okay, so what were the best predictors they found in that study? Which components mattered most for CMA?
The best markers for predicting clinical CMA itself were IgE levels to whole cow's milk extract, F2, and specifically IgE to casein. Casein is component NBOS D8. Think of casein like ovomucoid in egg. It's the main heat-stable protein fraction in milk. The whey proteins like alpha-lactoalbumin and beta-lactoglobulin are more heat-labile and less reliable on their own for predicting persistence.
Got it. Stable proteins again being key. What were the diagnostic numbers for casein IgE?
The optimal cutoff they found for casein was about 2.33 kOL or higher. That gave sensitivity around 60-63% and specificity around 83-87%. Whole milk IgE was similar.
Okay, so decent numbers, but like with peanut, still not quite good enough to completely replace the oral challenge for the initial diagnosis on their own.
Exactly. The sources are clear on that. Even with those optimal cutoffs, you can't reliably separate all the allergic kids from the tolerant ones just based on the blood test. The challenge is still needed to confirm the diagnosis initially, but once you know a child has failed that challenge, once CMA is confirmed, that's when the CRD markers, especially casein, become really powerful prognostic tools.
Right. The study then tracked those kids who failed the challenge and grouped them based on when they eventually outgrew the allergy.
Yes, they had 3 groups. T03, kids who developed tolerance early by age 4. T48, those who developed tolerance later. And Group P, the kids with persistent CMA, who were still allergic at the end of the study.
And what did they find when they looked back at the initial blood tests of those groups?
The difference was striking. The kids who ended up in Group P, the persistent group, had significantly larger skin prick test reactions and much, much higher IgE levels to whole milk, to the whey proteins, and most importantly, to casein right back at the beginning compared to all the other groups.
So high IgE levels early on, especially to that stable casein protein, strongly suggest the allergy is likely to hang around for years, maybe even into adolescence.
That's the key takeaway. It gives clinicians and families a much better idea of the likely duration. It helps manage expectations, plan nutrition long-term. High IgE to whole milk, and particularly to casein, significantly boosts the odds of a persistent allergy. They could even differentiate the early versus late tolerance groups just based on their initial whole milk IgE levels.
That predictive power is huge for counseling families. Okay, what about predicting severity? Not just duration, but how bad the reaction might be during the challenge itself.
They looked at that too, and yes, they found a significant correlation. Higher IgE levels, again to whole milk, F2, and to casein, were linked to more severe reactions during the oral food challenge when graded using something like the Sampson score.
So higher IgE equals higher risk of a bad reaction, on average.
On a group level, yes. That correlation exists.
So why can't we use that IgE level to decide, say, who needs to carry an EpiPen? Or maybe even who shouldn't be challenged at all if their levels are sky high?
And this is the critical caveat the sources really stress. While that correlation is statistically significant for the group, there's huge individual variation. Some kids with really high IgE levels had only mild reactions during the challenge, and conversely, some with lower levels had severe ones.
I see.
The studies emphasize that the challenges were conducted safely even in those with very high IgE. So while the levels give you a sense of group risk, they are not reliable enough to predict individual severity or reaction threshold accurately in the clinic.
So CRD doesn't replace the challenge for figuring out exactly how sensitive one specific person is or how severe their reaction will be.
Correct. It's a powerful tool for prognosis and group risk, but not for that level of individual prediction yet.
Okay, let's pivot now to our furry friends, cat, dog, and horse allergens. Here, the role of CRD seems a bit different again. Less about the initial yes-no diagnosis of a food allergy.
Right.
And more about assessing risk, especially asthma risk, and untangling complex sensitization patterns, including cross-reactivity.
Absolutely. With animal allergens, we're dealing with several important protein families. The lipocalins are a big groupthink, FeL-D4 from cats, CAN-F1 from dogs, EquaC1 from horses. These are often major allergens found in high amounts in dander, saliva, urine.
Okay, lipocalins are key. What else?
Then you have the serum albumins, like FeL-D2 from cats, CAN-F3 from dogs. These are usually considered minor allergens in terms of causing direct respiratory symptoms, but they're really important for understanding cross-reactivity between mammals. They share a lot of sequence similarity, sometimes over 80%.
So reacting to cat albumin might mean you also react to dog albumin.
Or even surprisingly, to albumin in pork or beef. It's the basis of the cat pork syndrome, for example. CRD helps identify these links.
Fascinating. Okay, let's zero in on cat and dog. Cat allergy seems simpler.
Relatively speaking, yes. Cat allergy is really dominated by one molecule, FeL-D1. It's a secretoglobin protein. Something like 90% of people sensitized to cats react to FeL-D1. So testing for IgE to FeL-D1 is a very strong indicator of cat allergy. And importantly, it's a key marker for assessing asthma risk associated with cat exposure.
But dog allergy is messier.
Much messier, partly because the commercial skin test extracts for dog allergy can be really variable in quality and composition, and partly because dogs just have a more complex mix of relevant allergens compared to cats.
So this is where CRD really needs to step in to bring clarity to dog allergy and link specific sensitizations to clinical outcomes like asthma.
Exactly, and the components definitely matter for risk assessment. The studies highlighted that being sensitized specifically to CAN-F5 and also being co-sensitized to CAN-F1 and CAN-F2, both lipocalins, conferred the highest risk for having asthma among dog allergic individuals. So the molecular profile helps predict respiratory severity.
Okay, that brings us to what might be the most surprising finding in these sources about animal allergy, this whole CAN-F5 and male dog thing.
It's a fantastic example of molecular precision, isn't it? CAN-F5 is a prostatic kallikrein, meaning it's a protein produced in the prostate gland, so it's present in significant amounts only in male dogs.
Wow. Okay. How common is sensitization to it?
It's surprisingly common. Depending on the study, somewhere between 30% and 70% of dog allergic patients show IgE reactivity to CAN-F5. And here's the kicker. In some studies, up to nearly 60% of those reacting to CAN-F5 were only reacting to CAN-F5 among the tested dog components. They were monosensitized.
Wait. So if I test positive only to CAN-F5, does that mean I'm literally only allergic to male dogs?
That's exactly what the evidence suggests. Monosensitization to CAN-F5 appears to be a highly specific marker for allergy only to male dogs. Studies confirm this patient's monosensitized to CAN-F5 didn't react to female dog extracts in skin tests or provocation tests and reported no symptoms when exposed only to female dogs.
That changes everything for pet ownership advice. A patient previously told you're allergic to dogs, avoid them all, might actually be able to safely own a female dog.
Potentially, yes. It allows for incredibly specific, personalized guidance that just wasn't possible before CRD.
Amazing. Okay, beyond that specific finding, what else does CRD tell us about overall risk and severity with pet allergies?
It reinforces this concept called molecular spreading or polysensitization. Basically, the more different allergen components you react to, the more likely your allergy is to be severe.
So complexity breeds severity.
In general, yes. being sensitized to a greater number of different components correlates strongly with increased disease severity. Specifically, being polysensitized, reacting to 3 or more different animal components, maybe including lipocalins, kallikrein like CANF5, and secreted globins like FeLD1, was strongly linked to having severe asthma.
And it's associated with objective measures of airway inflammation.
Yes. Higher levels of bronchial inflammation markers, like higher FeNO levels, that's fractional exhaled nitric oxide, a measure of airway inflammation.
So the molecular fingerprint is a direct window into the underlying disease severity in the airways.
It seems to be a much better indicator than just the whole extract test result, and it has predictive power over time, too. One study showed that being sensitized to FeLD1 and CANF1 way back at age 4 was a better predictor of having allergy symptoms at age 16 than the original whole extract test results were.
So the component data offers long-term prognostic value as well.
It appears so.
Okay, finally, we have to touch on that unexpected connection between CANF5 and, well, human health.
Right. The CANF5 and PSA link, it's quite remarkable. CANF5, the male dog protein, shares about 60% sequence identity with human prostate-specific antigen, PSA.
The same PSA tested for in men's health screening.
The very same.
Yeah.
And the sources point out that perhaps because of this similarity, sensitization to CANF5 in women has been linked to allergic reactions to human seminal fluid during intercourse.
Wow, that's a connection I wouldn't have expected.
It's likely rare, but it's a crucial potential link that only molecular testing like CRD could really uncover and help clinicians assess when they counsel women who are sensitized to dogs, especially male dogs. #tag outro.
This has been an incredibly detailed look at component-resolved diagnostics. Let's try and boil down the main takeaways for you, the listener.
Okay. I think the first thing is that CRD isn't magic, but it's a really sophisticated addition to the toolbox. It gives us molecular clarity that we just didn't have with the old whole extract tests.
Right. And for something like peanut allergy, where the stakes are so high, CRD offers these potentially definitive decision points. Using components like ARA-H2 or ARA-H6, you can sometimes achieve 100% certainty, 100% specificity in diagnosing the allergy, which could slash the number of dangerous, stressful oral challenges needed, maybe by more than half in some groups.
Absolutely. And then there's the prognostic angle, especially clear in cow's milk allergy. High levels of stable components like casein strongly predict that the allergy is going to stick around for longer. That helps plan long-term management, even if it doesn't replace the initial challenge for diagnosis itself.
And for pet allergies, CRD allows for real phenotyping. It links these complex molecular profiles directly to things like asthma risk and severity. And it offers incredibly specific advice, like potentially identifying someone who's only allergic to male dogs because of CANF5 sensitization.
Exactly. But we have to reiterate, CRD is not currently a complete replacement for the oral food challenge. That gold standard is still needed to determine an individual's exact trigger threshold or precisely predict their reaction severity. But CRD is an essential complementary tool. It's driving precision medicine forward, especially for safety, for risk stratification, and for understanding different allergy phenotypes.
Okay, and as always, we leave you with a provocative thought to mull over based on the sources. We learned that sensitization to CANF5, that male dog protein, correlates with a higher risk of allergy to human seminal fluid in women, likely due to the similarity with PSA. So given that CRD can pinpoint women sensitized specifically to CANF5, what are the implications? Should this specific component testing become routine for dog-sensitized women? How should clinics integrate this knowledge into risk assessment and counseling, potentially discussing pet choices, or even the rare but real risk of seminal plasma allergy? Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into component-resolved diagnostics.
Until next time, stay curious.